Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 Early Access action. Yes, indeed, we're back with the Dark Elves. We're going to be taking on our cousins, the Wood Elves, today. I am fighting Janet on occasion, so let's go ahead and jump straight to the army compositions here. I've got Malekith leading the way for my force. Since he's got a shield, I was expecting plenty of shooting out of the Wood Elves, and since Malekith has a shield and Helebron and Marathi both do not, wanted to bring him. He's got self-healing through Soul Stealer, Power of Darkness, and Gaze of Malice, which is very good against low armor elf infantry, Wood Elf infantry, that is. In terms of the rest of the army here, we've got 2 units of Sisters of Slaughter, very good in this matchup. They have a missile block chance, only have 5 armor, but they do a lot of DPS to low armor units. We've got 4 Dread Spears, including the Helebronis over here with their beautiful purple and pink gradient shields. We've also got the Slaanesh Harvesters, Regiments of Renowned Doomfire Warlocks, 2 units of Dark Riders with shields. Over here we've got the another unit of Doomfire Warlocks, 1 in the rear, and 2 Bolt Throwers to give me a little bit of ranged firepower. Let's go ahead and take a look at Janet on Occasion's Wood Elf army. His force is going to be led by Orion here, who did get a little bit of a buff in this current build. He's got an anti-large bonus, if we go ahead and look, of 15, which is not the most, but it definitely is helpful. Gives him that extra melee attack and weapon strength. In terms of the rest of the army, he's got the Firebark Elders, 3 units of War Dancers through the center, Sisters of Thorn on the right on the left, with 2 Wild Riders on the right. We've also got some Dryads and the Regiment of Renowned Wildwood Rangers. They have essentially the same kit as just regular Eternal Guard. They actually have shields and the Azrai Spear. They still have anti-large armor piercing, not quite as much weapon strength as regular Wildwood Rangers, but they do have armor sundering and amazing combat stats at 56 attack, 51 defense. They also have charged defense against large baseline, so they don't necessarily need to be in the forest, but if they are in the forest, they do get that plus 12 bonus versus large. This Guardians of the Wildwood is the one that all Wildwood Rangers have. And yeah, the Firebark Elders, of course, give an area of effect resistance to fire, I believe. If we go ahead and look here, yeah, plus 25% flame resistance. So even not with tree units, if you expect to be facing Lore of Fire, still a pretty good option. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick the battle into full gear, and we'll watch what happens. So we're going to be skirmishing with these the Bolt Throwers, shooting in at the Firebark Elders, and then over on this far side you can see I repositioned the 1 Doomfire Warlock to help respond to these Wild Riders. This is both, I think, the first matchup, the first time we played this matchup. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, Janet and I both weren't exactly sure what would happen in this engagement, so we're both going to throw in our light cavalry and kind of see what happens here. I do drop both Doom Bolts from both units of Doomfire Warlocks, and that is going to allow me to mostly win out on the Wild Riders here. Now, those of you who have seen my testing will know Wild Riders do win out if they get a clean charge, but because of the way this engagement unfolded, this one unit took the brunt of the charge, and so they didn't get a good charge on the second unit, which then allowed them to come in on the flank, kind of clean things up. We're also supporting with the unit of Dread Spears, which of course is going to swing things in my favor. Meanwhile, in the front line, War Dancers and Sisters of Slaughter clashing in the middle. Again, if you've seen my testing, you know pretty much how this goes. Sisters of Slaughter will beat the brakes off of War Dancers. That being said, Orion's around to give some support. There's the Firebark Elders and more kind of pushing through here. We're going to be dropping a Soul Stealer to try and heal Malekith up a little bit, as he has taken some heat potentially here, but the Bolt Throwers doing a good job poking away at those Wardens there. War Dancers obviously going to cut through Dread Spears, but the Dark Riders are now going to come through. The Slaanesh Harvesters also doing a good job cleaning up this side over here. You can see that Murderous Prowess now popping off map wide. Unfortunately, my Dread Spears do get terrified here. Sisters of Slaughter, though, are able to finish off those War Dancers, and we beat the Wild Riders pretty decisively. The Sisters of Thorn were currently here taking out a Bolt Thrower crew, but they are going to get caught out by the Doomfire Warlocks, and because of the Sisters of Thorn rely on their physical resistance as their primary defensive stat, obviously the Doomfire Warlocks with their poison and magic damage are just going to cut through these Sisters of Thorn, so definitely a little bit of a mistake there, but again, don't be judging the skill of any of the players in this early access time period by the battles that you see. Of course, it's only a small sample size, Plus, you know, we're all trying to learn all this new stuff. It's a whole new world with all these new regiments of renown for the old world, new regiments of renown for dark elves and high elves, and of course a whole new faction with Norska. So there's plenty to learn still, and we both traded plenty of games. So yeah, this time it is going to be a victory for the Dark Elves, and just goes to show how powerful the Dark Elf Rush is. The Wood Elves previously have had pretty strong rush armies, all things considered. I know most people like to play them with a really kind of skirmish-heavy kite strategy, but honestly, I think that the Wood Elves had a pretty strong rush strategy before. If you took a pretty heavy core of War Dancers, like Janet did here, previously that would work out relatively well against Dark Elves and some other factions. You could pretty much just rush them with Wild Riders and War Dancers and just kind of roll them over. But Doomfire Warlocks in this specific matchup, I think, swing that back in the Dark Elves' favor, just because it helps you contest at the very least with Wild Riders. And as you saw there, if you're able to get a favorable engagement, you can actually beat Wild Riders more or less one-on-one, which is super cost-effective. You can see both these Doomfire Warlocks pulling some chevrons. One of them 35 kills and a chevron, the other 80 and 2 chevrons. For Janet's army, the War Dancers ended up being pretty rough in the front line, and I think now that this matchup has changed a little bit and that the Dark Elves have even more frontline hitting power, especially against light armor stuff, I mean, these Sisters of Slaughter just cleaned up house in the front line. So I do think that you're going to want to go with more of a missile strategy against the Dark Elves. I do think that things like Deepwood Scouts could potentially have a place in this matchup. I mean, obviously, if you have things like Glade Riders, Wild Riders, I do think are still a pretty solid pick in this matchup. But you probably want to use them a little bit more defensively. Again, we're just kind of trying things out here. But well played to Janet on occasion. Since that was kind of a short one, we're going to go ahead and jump into another replay featuring the King of the Woods, Orion. This time, I'm going to be taking Orion and fighting Gojira's Norska, featuring Wulfrik, the Wanderer. So you can see I've got Orion himself, Branch Wraith. We've got a mix of Dryads and Eternal Guards in the front line, including the Regiment of Renown Eternal Guard, which are unbreakable. That's their special attribute. We've also got these... we're kicking off right away here, you can see, with this Wild Vanguard action, so I'm immediately going to put it into slow-mo. We've also got these Hawkeyes of Drakira. These are Regiment of Renown Way Stalkers, or sorry, Way Watchers. They've got the Smoke Bomb ability. This is exactly the same ability that the Nasty Skulkers have, which just gives them a bit of extra escapability. They also have Discourage on their bowfire, which the regular Way Watchers do not have, so they do apply that leadership debuff on their bowfire. Very, very strong Regiment of Renown, as are these Regiment of Renown Eternal Guards. These are the guys. These guys are unbreakable. Cheap-ish. I mean, these guys are about 900 points. So they're not crazy cheap, but the relatively low-tier unbreakable Regiments of Renown are some of the strongest. We've also got 2 units of Glade Guards with Hagbane tips. And up here, we've got some Sisters of Thorn, 2 units of them, and 2 units of Deepwood Scouts. You can see for the Norskins, he's got a heavy force of Vanguard here of 2 Marauder Horsemen with some Beasts of Tashnar. These are the Regiment of Renown Norskin Wolves here. So got another unit of Marauder Horsemen, and then through the main line we've got some Norskin Ice Wolves on either side, a couple of Famir Warriors, Marauders, Icehorn Marauders, more Marauders all around, so all the Marauders. And yeah, let's kind of see how things go here. So you can see I've kind of taken a little bit of a defensive position, utilizing the terrain to my advantage here, using this kind of terrain piece. And there's also somewhat of a cliff here. There is an entrance over here and over here, so I'll have to be careful about that. But right off the bat, we're getting a very favorable engagement with these Sisters of Thorn applying their debuff. Obviously, without any magic damage here other than the Famir. As long as I can stay away from the Famir, these guys will be relatively safe, but we're using that the Curse of Onrayr, rather, and also using Orion here to hopefully get a terror route on some of these lower tier troops. You can see Orion getting in here all wild. He does count as a large entity, so we'll have to be careful, as do these Ice Wolves, though. But yeah, because Orion has very low armor, it's going to be relatively risky. That being said, I'm just trying to form a little bit of a clump here so that we can potentially unleash some of Orion's bound magic spells. Those Sisters of Thorn ended up taking a lot more damage than I was comfortable with. Over here, you can see we're having to use this other unit to kind of tie things down and try and spring these Deepwood Scouts free, since those Norskin Ice Wolves had applied that Frostbite debuff. We're able to rout off the Norskin Ice Wolves, and you can see Orion going to be dropping his magic in this big old blob around him. That also allows these Glade Guards with Starfire Shafts to kind of fire in from the flank here. And again, all these low armor Marauder troops are going to be relatively vulnerable to that. The Deepwood Scouts getting inundated in the back line by Beasts of Tashanar. A little bit unfortunate. Ooh, I heard a pendulum go off. I didn't see exactly where it was, but looked like it cleaved through a bunch of the troops kind of clumped up around Orion there. And yeah, we're going to use the Sisters of Thorn to rout off the Beasts of Tashanar there with a nice rear charge. The Hawkeyes of Drakira, kind of a mouthful there, just chilling in the back here. We're going to be targeting them specifically on the Famir, since they're the only thing in this army of Gojira's that has heavy armor. But yeah, at this point things are looking pretty well for us. I do think that you're going to see quite a bit of play like this from the Wood Elves. Obviously this is a style of play that they were already pretty decent at, and some of their new regiments of renown definitely tie into this style of play. It's nice to have their regiments. They do kind of suffer from a similar problem that the Dark Elves and High Elves suffer from to a degree, in that a lot of their regiments of renown are pretty expensive. So you kind of have to pick and choose which ones you're going to bring. It's really tough to bring more than, 2 to 3 in a single build, just because they're all so expensive. But they're all potentially incredibly powerful. So unfortunately I do get caught up a little bit by the Famir there. Those Sisters of Thorn are going to be routing off, and you can see the Norskins have made it to my lines here, going to be somewhat pushing through and getting in on these Glade Guard, tying them down. You can see another Penumbral Pendulum going to be going down, though, on these Marauders clumped up on the Dryads here, just cleaving through them, doing some really nice damage. And those Glade Guards that are free are going to be turning to fire at these Marauder Horsemen here. Balance power already starting to tip in my favor. Hawkeyes of Drakir not really threatened too much. There are some Hounds and some other units around, but the Sisters of Thorn, these Deepwood Scouts, providing ample distraction. We've got some Dryads on station as well, just kind of chilling in the back. A very nice bombardment spell. Oh man, the damage from that, the Flame Bombardment there is just absolutely massive. Of course, Famir Balefiend Lorifire is going to be pretty strong in this matchup if you expect a lot of tree units, and a very nice Sea Fang as well. Sea Fang is going to be really good against the low armor infantry of the Wood Elves. That being said, Wulfrik, he does have a silver shield, so that in and of itself will make him relatively hard to shoot, but it's still, I do think this is one of the matchups that's going to be tougher for Norska, potentially. You can see these Hawkeyes of Jakira having used their ammo on Beasts of Tashanar, which is not the most cost-effective use of ammo, but it's all good at the end of the day. Again, these Dryads just kind of chilling in the back as a reserve, not really needed yet. There's a big old clump of Marauders here, though, that's just asking for another Penumbral Pendulum. The front line, the Eternal Guards have mostly been able to clean up here. Again, the armor-piercing anti-large of the Eternal Guard is going to be pretty rough for the Famir to have to deal with, so they're going to be routed away. And yeah, you can see the Forest Spirits here holding the line pretty well. We dropped that Shield of Thorns to give them a bit of extra weapon strength. Just some of the support spells from those Sisters of Thorn. Not exactly sure where they got off to, but looks like they're fighting in here. And yeah, just going to be continuing to drop that Earthblood, healing up the guys in that pocket. Thankfully, Orion managed to survive that, mostly due to the Cloak of Isha, but Wulfrik's going to get in here and drop that Hunter of Champions on him, but oh man, spear right to the face, and despite the fact that Wulfrik is not a large entity, he can't be too comfortable with getting speared by Orion right in the face. So despite being the Hunter of Champions here, I doubt he'll be able to take down Orion. He might be able to, actually, with 1 or 2 more hits. The Cloak of Isha is providing that healing and damage resistance for... Oh, but he does take down Orion. So very well played, Wulfrik, indeed. Don't think it's going to be enough to win the battle, but Orion does go down there. Unfortunately, most of the Marauder infantry routing off at this point. There's really not too many units left for Norska on the field besides Wulfrik himself. There's a few other Marauders fighting here against these Eternal Guard here in the woods. A beautiful cinematic battle. Yeah, I definitely think that Wood Elves are going to be strong. I do think that the High Elves potentially have a better matchup here with some of their new tools. Norska, I think, has a relatively rough matchup against the Wood Elves, and the Dark Elves, I think, have a lot of new tools here as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, I'm not the best Wood Elf player. I think this build is going to be relatively competitive, but of course, it's hard for me to really say. Once a lot of the high-level tournament players get a hold of the DLC and start to play tournaments and in different rules and sorts of things like that, I'm sure they'll find ways of really optimizing and perfecting type of strategy. But yeah, I'm curious to see kind of how things play out once the patch goes live. Just a few more days and y'all will get access to it. And the great thing about the current patch, and big props to Creative Assembly for this, is even if you're not interested at all in the Dark Elf, High Elf DLC, which by the way I think is completely worth it if you're interested in those two races. Even if you're not, it may still be worth it. Their campaigns are super fun. But that being said, if you're not interested in that at all, there's still plenty for you in this DLC. Old world races, getting new regiments of renown, and even new units in terms of the dwarves. We've got a whole new faction with Norska, lots of tweaks and updates, little free releases, Alathanar for the High Elves as well, with the unit of Shadow Walkers. I believe that comes free with his faction, so there's tons of stuff. Even if you're not really interested in the DLC, there's something for everyone coming, so I'm super excited for you to get your hands on it. Whew. Anyway, in terms of this battle here, Orion able to rack up 90 kills there, pretty decent, even though he did go down like a true patriot. Dryads also did very well here. I do like them quite a bit in this matchup. They'll get cut up by Marauder or Berserkers, but Berserkers aren't a super common pick in this matchup just because they'll get shot up pretty easily, so it's a bit of give and take. They'll trade pretty well against the basic Marauders. The magic damage also helps cut through the physical resist of late tier and rage, so that in and of itself is pretty strong. I do like Sisters of Thorn in this matchup as well, just because the Norskins don't really have a lot of units that can catch them, and those that do won't necessarily win in melee if you take the engagement appropriately. Deepwood Scouts did okay, a little bit underwhelming, but they did distract that large mobile force of Gojira for some time. Hawkeyes of Jakira took out quite a few Famir, and I think these guys are going to be a staple of competitive play. We'll have to see, but the Branch Wraith also racking up quite a few kills on some Penumbral Pendulums. 70 kills for Wulfrik himself. Like I said, that Seafang, great against low armor infantry. Even armored infantry will take some pretty good damage from it. But I do think he might be the best pick in this matchup. It's tough to say. I think this is going to be one of the tougher matchups. Although you do have a lot of really good fast attack units, like these Norscan Ice Wolves, for example. If they get kited out and charged a couple times by Sisters of Thorn and then shot a little bit by Deepwood Scouts, you know, it can be tricky to make them work. But overall, very well played to Gojira and, of course, Janet on occasion. If you guys enjoyed watching these battles, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.